Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel. And this week we are talking about fascism, what it is, and if it is here today in America. 15-20 years ago, you would have found the word fascism probably only in the confines of a history textbook, and it would have been read only if you were a high school or college student, or a teacher or college professor forcing said students to actually read about 20th century history. But the word recently has actually been brought back to life by people on both ends of the political spectrum. The only difference is to whom the word is directed. When Barack Obama was in the White House, a Google search of Obama fascist pulled roughly 5 million hits. Not scientific by any stretch of the imagination, but it kind of gives you an idea of how people on the right felt. Now, of course, the shoe is on the other foot, and if you Google search Trump is a fascist, you'll get about 5.4 million hits. The Washington Post, the New York Times, Medium, Slate, all of these media outlets have pushed and repeated this mantra. Whether it's his rhetoric, his tweets, or his policies, for many today, Trump has become the Hitler of our times. It's actually gotten so bad that earlier this year in July, Congresswoman AOC told Yahoo News that we were in danger of slipping into full-blown out authoritarian fascism. And it's not just Trump who is a fascist. The Huffington Post, when they wrote up about his rally in Greenville, North Carolina, described it as fascist, and backed up their claims with tweets and remarks from so-called experts, such as Yale's Jason Stanley, a philosopher, or New York University historian Ruth Ben-Giat. The conclusion is that everyone who is still for Trump, who attends his rallies, who plans on voting for him in 2020, is as much of a full-blown fascist as he is, because at this stage of the game, the only reason why you would vote for a fascist is because you're a fascist as well. I particularly love this part of the Huffington Post's story where they actually quoted one of the attendees of Trump's Greenville, North Carolina rally. Quote, "Islam is not a real religion," Bud Wizard Harrell, a 61-year-old resident of Bear Grass, North Carolina, stated falsely. "It's a religion of wars is what it is. Read the Quran. I've read a little bit. All I've seen is hateful stuff in there. Vile, hateful stuff. And also I see, just like what's happening to Europe, they're trying to do here. Invade our country and get enough people in to have voting power to take over and control our country. And that's what it is, an invasion," Harrell said of Muslim immigrants in a perfect recitation of the white supremacist Great Replacement conspiracy theory, which motivated a shooter to massacre 51 Muslims inside 2 New Zealand mosques this past March. Conclusion? Trump's rallies are just brimming with fascists and racists, which isn't surprising since fascism and racism go hand in hand like peanut butter and jelly, right? But does all this mean that fascism is just a hairbreadth away of taking over the US and transforming us into a Gilead-like theocracy created in a Margaret Atwood wet dream? Well, to really know if that's the case or not, we're going to have to take a step back and actually understand what fascism is. Because, funnily enough, for all the bandying about of the word fascism, there is actually very little discussion as to what it is. Because it forms such a prominent part of our lexicon, you might think that fascism is a pretty old idea, but actually, it's only 100 years old. It's a baby in comparison with the rest of world history, created in 1919 by Benito Mussolini. Now, Mussolini originally began as a socialist, like his dad, and he believed in the socialist dream of the workers of the world uniting, overthrowing the old order, and bringing in the promised utopia. But in the trenches of World War I, Mussolini started to have doubts about this socialist promise of the international uprising of the workers. Surrounded by Italian soldiers of all different professions and all different backgrounds, Mussolini realized that there never ever was going to be a universal uprising of laborers, because an Argentinian laborer had nothing in common with a dock worker in Liverpool, who had nothing in common with a vineyard worker from Italy. Mussolini decided that it was nationality, the nation, that would provide a much better glue for instituting an overthrow of the old order, which is why, after the war was over in 1919, he formed the Fascist Party of Italy. But what makes fascism what it is? What makes up its essence? One big element that goes into the DNA of fascism is the idea of strength. Now, caveat here, gang, like every other evil thing or evil idea, fascism really can't create anything on its own. It has to take things that are already in existence, things that are already good, and pervert them, twist them to suit its own purposes. And this is what fascism does with strength. Where strength is a necessary and good thing in the real world, fascism twists it into this Orwellian strength through unity, unity through faith mindset, which technically comes actually from V for Vendetta instead of 1984, but never mind about that right now. Now, where does this unity come from? Well, it doesn't come from a shared language, culture, customs, history, or heroes, what we would call organic things. Instead, it actually comes from the common or general will. Now, what the heck is the general will? It's an idea of political philosophy that actually goes back to the 17th century, but which is much more commonly associated with the 18th century French political theorist Jean-Jacques Rousseau. This guy right here. Very briefly, for Rousseau, the general will is the idea of justice which each person has by virtue of being a citizen of a nation or a country, and which is manifested through the people in the General Assembly of that country or nation, or the legislature, as we would say today. The goal of the general will is the common good, what is good for everyone based on our shared universal human nature and based on the idea that we are citizens of the same country. Fascism takes this idea, but as usual, twists it for its own ends. Under fascism, the general will isn't individual citizens striving for the common good, because the individual doesn't exist under fascism. Instead of individual persons, fascism extols the people, or the masses, where each individual person actually becomes absorbed by the state and simply becomes cells in the body of the state. Kind of like the Blob. And this actually was the official teaching of fascist Italy. Mussolini's Minister of Education, Giovanni Gentili, preached that in order to be faithful to the general will, each individual Italian had to submit himself to the auspices of the state. But this teaching actually led to something else. If there are no individuals, or more exactly, if there are no individual persons, if there is just this amorphous blob called the people, then there has to be somewhere ahead, a focal point, where the general will is concentrated and distributed to the rest of the nation. That focal point is the leader, il duce, mein Führer, el Codio. And who just happened to be the leader of fascist Italy? And they didn't even try to hide it. The Council of Fascists took over from the Italian Assembly, which pretty much became impotent, and all they did was basically rubber stamp everything that Mussolini decreed and wanted. Mussolini's motto, everything for the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state, meant not only submitting oneself to the state, but submitting oneself to him personally, as the manifestation of the state. Now, this belief in the supremacy of the leader leads to other tenets of fascism, such as the disbelief in transcendent things, as well as irrationalism. If the leader is the end-all and be-all, then there can't be anything above the leader, meaning that there can't be any transcendent realities like truth and goodness, nothing against which the actions of the leader can be measured and found wanting. And since truth and goodness can't exist objectively because whatever the leader says goes, then that means that fascist regimes by necessity have to be irrational so that whatever the leader decrees is the right thing to do. Because again, if rationalism is actually a standard, then the actions and decrees of the leader can actually be measured against that standard and found wanting, and if that happens, the whole facade is going to come crashing down. These tenets all lead to practical applications in the fascist state. It leads first to a cult of personality around the leader. In Nazi Germany, for example, German soldiers swore an allegiance not to Germany, not to the German Constitution, but to Adolf Hitler personally. And children in Germany were instructed to pray to Mein Führer for candy, which always somehow magically appeared on their desks. The Italian Fascist Party's HQ in Rome was decorated like this in 1934 for the elections. That's actually the head of Il Duce, Mussolini. And the SI, SI, SI that you see repeated on the background, that is actually the word sì, Italian for yes, repeated over and over and over and over again. Mussolini portrayed himself as a helper of the common man, as well as the emperor of the Trenza Roma, or the Third Rome, Rome reborn under his regime. Fascism also leads to strict control of the press and cinema, as well as secret police forces, the Gestapo in Nazi Germany, and the Black Shirts in Fascist Italy, not only to control the people, but to punish people who would cause trouble by doubting the word of the dear leader. So from all this, we can say that fascism is an ideology that throws out transcendent things and personhood in exchange for a perverted idea of strength, from a perverted idea of unity, concentrated and focused in the cult of personality of the leader. Now the $64 question is this what we see in 2019 America? The short answer, providentially, is no. Power is not concentrated in the hands of the leader. Free elections have not been postponed or canceled. There is no secret police force that will make you disappear in the middle of the night or vaporize you later on after a show trial. The press and the arts are not being manipulated for the benefit of the leader or for his cult of personality. And while belief in transcendent realities is falling and irrationality is rising, there is no government department on equal to, say, Germany's Ministry of Propaganda that actually makes these things state policies. And no, Trump's supposed Muslim ban or his desire to actually secure the southern border does not count as fascism because, as we've just seen, fascism does not in and of itself necessitate a racial component. So everything's fine, right? Well, not quite, because unfortunately, there are fascist elements in 21st century America. Some of these too are on the political right. There's no getting around that. Racist groups like the KKK or Identity Europa. And while I've argued in the past that white supremacy is rising in the US, mostly because racism against Caucasian people has been made culturally appropriate, it still doesn't have the political or the cultural muscle to actually become a fascist regime. But there are fascist elements on the political left that have a much wider reach and whose roots are much deeper in the culture today. While an argument could be made that Trump has created his own cult of personality, pointing to his braggadocio, his attacks on the free press as fake news, or his claims that he is being persecuted through a witch hunt, bragging does not a cult of personality make. And many times, whether it's the oxygen given to things like the Charlottesville Very Fine People hoax or the continued attacks against Brett Kavanaugh, Trump's labeling of the press as fake news or the enemy of the people has actually been proven to be accurate. On the left, though, cults of personality are actually much more common, shall we say. And this time backed by the full structure of the media. Whether it's grade schools teaching their kids to sing about former President Obama, or Newsweek actually connecting President Obama with the divine, or the media actually forming links between someone, say, like Congresswoman AOC and beloved culturally relevant American heroes like Captain America or Wonder Woman. On the left too, there is this perverted idea of strength, which comes not now through unity, but through diversity, where human personhood must be subsumed into intersectionality, whether that's sexuality and gender, or race, or socio-economic status. Furthermore, this belief actually demands disbelief in the transcendent realities as well as irrationality. A man now can become a woman, and furthermore, can become a dragon. There are 100+ genders. 1619 must be seen as the real founding date of the country because slavery is the only way, it is the only prism through which to actually see accurately United States history. Rent control will work despite evidence to the contrary. People who disagree with any of these tenets of the left will find themselves politically and socially excommunicated via cancel culture. The left even has a prototype of Mussolini's black shirts in Antifa, the so-called anti-fascist movement, which, at this point in time, has actually taken over the streets of US cities and have attacked innocent people in those streets, as well as causing property damage. Their cry of, "Whose streets? Our streets," very eerily suggests the old us-them dichotomy of the 20th century fascists. Fascism is an ideology as destructive as any other ideology that has been created. And while there are elements of fascism today on both the right and the left, simply throwing out the term to describe anything you don't like trivializes it by making it a dime a dozen. Instead of just emotionally jumping forward and slapping the fascist label onto someone or something, take a moment and step back and actually look objectively at the thing or person. Remember what makes fascism fascism, and then come to a decision, a clear and honest decision as to whether that thing or person is actually fascist or not. And whatever your answer is, do not be afraid to share your conclusion with others. Not talking because you're afraid of what other people will think of you is a tactic that has allowed fascists to keep people in line for 100 years. But as always, what say you? Is fascism just something that is seen on the peripheries of the political divide? Or is it actually a much bigger problem? And in which case, is it concentrated more on the right or on the left? As always, let me know your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions down in the comment section below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by giving it a like, leaving a comment, and sharing it on social media with all your friends. And if you like videos about the culture, politics, and religion, but from a different POV, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to ring that bell for notifications so that you will always know when I post new videos like this every Tuesday that you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a bit of your day. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. And I will see you all again here next time, gang, on top of the stone. Ciao.